Welcome to Bulletproof Veteran Podcast. Thank you for your service.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Bulletproof Veteran Podcast. I'm super excited to have on the show today two representatives from an organization that you may not have heard of yet, but I think you're going to hear a lot about in the future. It's Zero Disaster Survival. And the reason I think that you're going to hear a lot about them in the future is they are onto something, because if you've heard about what's going on down in Texas, if you've heard about the bad winter that we had up here in the Northeast, I think more and more people are getting tuned into what they need in their home, how they need to be prepared for all these different situations. It's not just people that are prepping for the apocalypse, the stereotype of the prepper and all of that. This is real world stuff that we're dealing with time and time again. I mean, you listen to videos of Tim Kennedy down in Texas during this whole ice storm, and there's a guy who's prepared. And these two gentlemen from Zero Disaster are just trying to educate. They're just trying to show everybody what they need. They're going to be putting more and more content out. So I'm super excited to have them on now so that we could talk about what they're going to be doing in the future. So today I have on the show Carson Songy and John Plestina. We are going to be talking Plestina. Sorry, I always put an I on the end of things, but I do apologize. So we're going to be talking about their organization and what they are doing. But let's hear a little bit about them first. So, John, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been involved in this whole lifestyle now for, I'd say, going on close to 15 plus years. You know, we are we're a family now, or I have a family now, and it's become a very important thing near and dear to my heart to make sure that I always have a way to take care of my family. You know, this was something that started as a hobby, and it grew into something really important to me. And we wanted to be able to share that with the rest of the world. There's a lot of people that want to get their foot wet in, you know, get their feet wet into the prepping world, but they just don't know where to begin. It's information overload out there. So I kind of went on this mission to find a way to get that information out there in a more digestible format.
It's great. Now, do you have a military background, civilian background?
Yep. Purely civilian.
Civilian, okay.
Yeah, everything I've done, I mean, I've modeled a lot of my training exercises off of a variety of different military, law enforcement. I mean, you name it, I've done the research into every different area of the preparedness lifestyle, and I have kind of tested the waters, so to speak. I've done some training, I've done some exercises, I've learned the things that have worked well for me, I've learned the things that don't work, and you know, like I said, now I'm just trying to get that information back out there.
Awesome. I appreciate
it. Network. In addition to that, you know, we've been focused on developing a network, or that's been my goal, is to branch out and find others that are like-minded and bring them into this community together.
Yeah, that's really important. You know, whenever I talk to any of these organizations, everybody's learning that you don't have to know everything anymore. It's better to have that strong network. And listen, if I don't have the information, I'm going to send you to the organization that does, or is the expert in that. And that's the way you really grow a business. That's the way you really kind of operate nowadays. It's not just a one-stop, I know everything, just listen to me anymore. But thank you. Welcome to the show. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. Carson, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I guess I've been involved in the prepping lifestyle roughly about the same time as John, about 15 years, not directly as much as he has. I lived through Hurricane Katrina, and my dad was kind of prepping for that prior to it hitting New Orleans. So I've been around that lifestyle for a long time, and I grew up doing lots of backwoods hunting with my dad as well, lots of small game hunting and whatnot. So I was exposed to bushcraft and elements of wilderness survival since I was a child. And that's the aspect that always really stuck with me, was the outdoor survival portion. So yeah, and really that's where it started. So I guess you could say about 5 years ago, I really started to get into it. And then once I had my first child, I really started to kick the prepping into, fourth gear, so to speak. Because just like John said, I want to have a way to take care of my family if something does happen, like Hurricane Katrina, and you lose power for weeks on end, or there's a flood. I want to plan and a method to feed my kids and make sure their lives are comfortable and my life's as comfortable as possible. So.
Yeah, it's having the kid is it's an eye-opening experience to any type of real disaster. I know we lost power during a hurricane just this past fall, and I never used to care. Like if I lost power, it's not all right. You lose power, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to start the generator. I'm going to do what I got to do, whatever the case may be. Having the kid in the house kind of changed the game because now I'm like, all right. What do we have food wise? What are we doing for her? Is it a safe scenario? Are we, we had trees coming down and stuff like that. Is this tree close to the house? Is this one's close to her bedroom? Like now I'm looking at everything.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Exactly. And honestly,
go ahead, Carson.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say it was perfect example of when the prepping came in handy was when the beginning of the COVID pandemic happened. I mean, they shut everything down and people were hoarding toilet paper and food. And it was a nice feeling knowing that I had everything I needed to survive a while. So I didn't even have to go out and shop because I didn't really want to brave the hordes. It just didn't seem safe to me, especially at the time being in Las Vegas. I mean, people were hoarding these grocery stores bad. So it was a good feeling inside myself knowing that I had nothing to worry about. So and that's kind of a big reason.
Yeah.
So go ahead, John.
Yeah, please, John.
Well, I mean, ultimately, the whole point of getting started in prepping and continuing on this path, it may have started for one reason. And I'm gonna, funny story. A job many years ago, I worked for a retail organization. One of the managers I worked for was an author. He wrote stories about zombies. And he had recruited me while I was working with him at this retail organization to do some research for him into zombie survival. And I was kind of puzzled, but Walking Dead was just getting popular. And so I started looking at this stuff to help him out with a project. And that sparked some interest. I helped him admin his site for a while too. So I was doing this on a regular basis. And I was constantly finding things about just regular, real survival. And survival branched out into being prepared and those sort of things. And while I look back, it was fun. It was a hobby, it was something that I was doing just because I was interested in the content. But the moment family came into play, like you guys said, it changes everything. You start evaluating things much more closely. I live within a 50-mile radius of 3 active nuclear power plants. 2 of them I'm within the 20-mile radius. And so, I have to take into consideration dangers in my environment, those kind of things now that I have a child. If it was just me, I wouldn't be nearly as concerned. I would be a lot more of a free spirit about that type of thing. But when it comes down to it and you have little ones to protect, a spouse to protect, like there's people you care about, your loved ones, you gotta do the right thing. You have to be prepared and you have to have a plan in place.
Yeah. And your plan is going to change a lot when you have that little one, because even, you and your wife or you and your significant other, however it works, bugging out or something like that, not that hard if you had to just jump in the car and go. If you're toting a 2-year-old around, jumping in the car and just rolling might be a little bit more difficult. So your plan has to adjust for the members of your family, if it's a growing family or whatever. If you're caring for an elderly person, I'm basically the primary carer for my parents. They're fully functional. They could do everything on their own, but I don't know if there was a major disaster. I know I would have to be the one that would include them in whatever our plan was. So all these things have to come into play. Definitely. Now, John, why start Zero Disaster though? So, you're doing your thing.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, I'm a learner. I constantly want to be learning. And one of the best ways that I learn is by documenting and teaching it back to other people. I've carried that through in my career, in my personal life. It's just the way that I absorb things best. So, I was putting this all in the book and collect. I mean, really, like every piece of information that I've ever found valuable, I've documented it and I've stored it. And right now, it's living in a OneNote notebook. And I mean, it's massive. The file is 60 something gigs at
That's
this.
huge.
So I've
Wow.
kept records of all the really key things I've learned over these years. But at a certain point, after about 5 years, I was like, what am I doing with this by myself? Like, I need to share this. So I started ZDS, Zero Disaster Survival, as just a way for me to kind of voice that stuff. And it wasn't even for anybody that wanted to listen. If you're there, great. But just for me to be able to put this down in another forum. And I really didn't have plans to try to grow it into anything massive. That was never my goal when I first started it. Like I said, it was just a hobby. I branched into Instagram after about a year or two of just having a Facebook page. And we blew up pretty quickly there. We were within the first, well, I shouldn't say quickly. I guess that's relative, but I think we were at about 15,000 followers at one point, and I was really excited about what was happening. The growth was encouraging. It was motivational and gave me a reason to want to continue this and do bigger things. And right around the same time, I had read the book by Franklin Horton. It's called Locker 9. And this book is, so Franklin Horton, fantastic author, one of my tops. And he writes this book about his daughter going away to college. And I don't want to, no spoilers for anybody that
Right.
does, because it's a really good book. But as a prepper, the father is a prepper, he sets his daughter up with this plan because she's going away to school thousands of miles. And so he wanted to make sure she was going to be set. And he gave her this key, and she had this locker full of gear and found herself in a disaster. And in that locker was a book with all different people she could reach out to on her journey home.
Okay.
I was totally inspired by that. And I've heard people refer to that as spider points since that time. I don't know if there's an official term for it, but the whole idea was just, that was monumental to me. And so I went on this journey to start networking, essentially. I always had people DMing me through the social media platforms, and we would have conversations and things like that. But I was officially on a mission to look for some people that I could turn this into more of a community. And lo and behold, Carson reached out to me kind of in the midst of all of that. So I didn't find him, he found me. I was doing these scenarios on our Instagram site, pretty regularly, almost weekly at that time. And the scenarios kind of paint this picture for you of a crisis situation. And the idea is to be a brain exercise. Put yourself in that situation. We've given you facts. What did you observe from the story, and what would you do to react in that situation? And that sparks a lot of great discussion. And so I was able to meet a couple of people because of those scenarios, Carson being one of them. But he and I hit it off right off the bat. We had some fantastic discussion about, again, just kind of what ifs. And from there, it took only a little while before I was like, you're the perfect fit. And so I brought him on. And Carson, let me let you speak a little bit about your journey so far.
Yeah, sure. So it kind of happened around the same time I started getting serious into survival and preparedness. And I had followed a couple pages of survival pages on Instagram, and Zero Disaster being one of them back when there was, obviously we had a lot less followers, but like John said, our big thing in Zero Disaster is every week we put out a scenario that kind of just challenges people's thinking. It gets them thinking, even if it's not completely realistic, it challenges your mind to make a hard decision. And I really like that he did that. So I reached out to him one day and said, hey man, I love your scenarios. Like, you mind if I kick you a scenario that we can talk about, maybe discuss? And ironically enough, it was about surviving a hurricane in New Orleans. That was the first conversation we had. So we discussed what would happen if there was a massive storm and we had to pretty much cross this big bridge across this lake to get back to my hometown. So, and I was deployed at the time. I was in Kuwait, and it was cool. It's kind of like a pen pal. So we started talking about Zero Disaster, how he started it, and I guess what our plans were in the future for survival and preparedness and whatnot, and just about prepping in general. And like John said, eventually he asked me to be a part of the community, and I was more than willing. I mean, Zero Disaster means a lot to me now, probably just as much as it means to John. So it was fate.
It's good. Sometimes that's just the way it works out. And it's funny that of course it was a hurricane story that was the one that kind of brought you guys together, because listen, you're going to draw from your personal experience, having lived through Katrina. I saw this week's scenario, and now I've only been following you guys for a little while, so I'm still kind of new to that kind of like exercise, but I did look at it, and you're right. It is definitely a conversation piece, because you're not going to know the answers right off just by looking at it. And you're going to read the scenario different than, say, I would. You guys are probably, looking at it from a 10 different angles and making sure that, am I hitting it from this side? Am I making sure I have all this equipment, blah, 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 whatever you're going to do. And as a layperson who's done minimal research into prepping and survival and stuff, I'm probably going to be very one-dimensional while looking at that. I'll probably get locked into one part of it and I'll miss something. And that's why this training is there. That's why there's these organizations that help with this, because you don't want to just look at that one dimension, because it's that other side that's going to bite you in the ass, and you're going to be, you're not going to plan for that.
And you're right. And that's kind of how our scenarios, I mean, they don't necessarily build on each other all the time, but it's always challenging different aspects of what people are thinking, whether it's a split decision that you make right there, or it's one of those things where you're, like you said, you have to think about, and you're like, man, what would I do in that situation? Like, what would I do? Like, for real, mate, like, and you get some interesting answers from people too. I mean, even between me and John, often we have separate answers, different answers. It's not a wrong or right answer. It's just an answer, because not every scenario can be, it's not a one answer for everything. I mean, there's going to be multiple answers that work for that specific person. So
that kind of leads into my next question. Does Zero Disaster kind of have a philosophy? So do you guys have a way that you attack how you educate your community? John, you can go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I kind of incorporated at the start of this my personal philosophy, and that, number one, you can't control everything. Control the controllables. So that's kind of my like overarching principle is I'm going to focus on the things that I have control over, and I'm not going to worry about the stuff. If an asteroid, using the example from this weekend scenario, was coming towards Earth, it is what it is. I'm going to go out and have a party. But I'm going to control the controllables. When there is an opportunity for me to make sure that I'm in a better situation, or my family or my friends or whoever is in a better situation because I took a few steps in advance, that's the goal. And what we're trying to really do here is take this vast, like monumental library of information that's out there, and we're trying to break it down into ways that somebody that is brand new to prepping could literally say, I'm going to sit down with you guys and understand how to become a prepper over the next year. Part of something we're developing for our website, but there's just, if you do it like the way I did, I just sat down and started searching things, and I wanted to be kind of, if you've ever seen the movie The Edge, Anthony Hopkins, he played a role in there. Yeah, he was a pretty slick character. He always had a solution. He always had a fix. Like whatever the problem was, Anthony Hopkins was that guy, and I wanted to be that guy. And as I started investing time into learning about what it was going to take to, become this prepper, I realized that it branches in so many different directions. It's not just store food and water and get a gun or guns. It goes everywhere. There's so many different subgenres of the prepping lifestyle, and I felt like I had to learn all of that. I had to get my feet wet in all of it, and understand a little bit of everything, Renaissance man style. And so I went that path, and I learned a tremendous amount, but there was no structure to it. And so I've spent the last 5 years kind of trying to put that back into a consistent structure that I could then turn around and teach to somebody else from the ground up. So instead of somebody just going out there and starting their search the way I did and hitting YouTube and just being overwhelmed, with so much content, we can give you a format, and the idea here is to be budget friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I've been lucky that my family supports this mission that I'm on. They're not active participants, so to speak, as much as I would like them to, although I get my kids involved quite a bit, and they love it. But I'm trying to make this plan happen in a way that one person could plan for their family without the involvement of the others, just in case they don't want to be. You could still be successful even if you've got naysayers in the home. So that's kind of been the overall mission here, is to package up all that information and give it to you in a way that you can afford, and you could do it without your spouse yelling at you, and have a structure to it, essentially.
Yeah. Well, and budget friendly is a big part for a lot of people, especially if you're just getting into it and you don't have stockpiles of different things, especially say ammunition, weapons, things like that. You're talking big dollar items.
Yeah.
If you just have unlimited funds, you have the bunker from Lost in your backyard and you're good to go. You're going to go down in there and you could live forever, and hey, good for you. But most of us don't have that amount of expendable income to just, hey, I'm going to just do whatever I want. So you have to pick and choose where to put your money, and also, how to stretch that dollar to do the things that are the most important. And you hit kind of the nail on the head with the controllables. Carson, what, in your opinion, name some controllables. So what are some things that I can control that I should kind of focus on?
Well, I guess this kind of go into my philosophy in prepping too. One thing you control, the main things that you can control is how you react to situations. And I think that's one of the most important things, is learning how to react to a serious situation. So say if I get stranded on an island like Castaway, you can freak out and probably die, but the controllables in that situation are, how am I going to react to this situation? What am I going to do right now that's going to keep me alive tonight? And that kind of goes to one of my first principles or philosophies, is keeping it simple. Especially with prepping. An example would be, if you're new to prepping, it can be overwhelming, especially with the amount of information out there. So, but you start simple. You start somewhere, and which would be like getting a 3-day supply of food and water. That's something you can simply do. And then it's a building block from there. You build upon that. You get up to a week's worth of food and water, or whatever you need, and then you build from there. It's keeping it simple is probably one of the biggest things people need to do, because prepping is a very, like John said, it's a very overwhelming and process, because there's just so much information that can come from you from every angle. I mean, there's food, water, surviving in the wilderness, guns, ammo. It's just, there's no straight answer. So keeping it simple would be my first thing. I think John mentioned it, getting family involved. I think that's a controllable as well.
Okay.
As best as you can. I'm lucky enough that my family is involved with it. So they support it. They understand. My wife specifically, she's on board. So that makes the whole prepping lifestyle much easier. And one of the other things you can do, a big controllable, is train. Train. If you have things you want to get better at, train. There's bushcraft skills or regular survival skills in general you need to train for. You can talk about it all you want, but when the time comes, you're going to react based on your experience. So training is a big controllable that everybody can have. And lastly, I would say never stop learning. Just like John said with that, this isn't really a hobby that everybody knows everything. You have to keep learning no matter what. And there's always going to be somebody that knows more than you. And it's best to listen to what they have to say. And yeah, pretty much just like me and John, for example, we have a very different background when it comes to survival and preparedness. Mine's more of the bushcraft and outdoor, and his is more of you're prepping making sure you have the proper amenities and whatnot for outlasting a natural disaster, so to speak. So we've kind of learned from each other, and that's kind of goes back to just making sure you're always learning.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key for everything, I think. If you get stagnant in anything you're doing, like you said, it's you're going to get passed by somebody else, or you're not going to be prepared for the things that change in the future. So you always have to be kind of honing that skill, learning, training, going through it, and keeping it simple is definitely something that I can agree with. Because, listen, if you don't have water in your house, that whole home generator that you spent 20 grand on with the sweet transfer switch and all of that, not really worth much to you, because if you don't have potable water, you're going to have a bad day. So knowing where to start and where to kind of build, and then, hey, listen, if you already have the supplies and then you want to go get your nice home generator, great, good on you. But getting off to that good platform and that good starting spot, like you said, 3 days of food and water, then you work up to, say, 7 days food and water.
Yeah. Right.
John, I don't even want to ask, how many days of food and water you got in the house?
I think I'm just a little bit over a year at this point. And,
wow.
Yeah.
What does a year's worth of water look like?
It's a lot.
Well, it looks like a couple of 55-gallon drums.
Okay.
This is, there's a variety of different ways you can store that kind of thing. But 55-gallon drums, they're blue. They're fairly expensive on Amazon. Really easy way to put a lot of water aside. But you can also do things like get yourself, there's a product called a water bob. And I think I've seen a couple of other knockoff versions of it, but it's a little thin plastic bag with a nozzle that wraps around your faucet for your bathtub. In the event of a crisis, the moment you know something bad's happening, drop it in your bathtub, fill it up. It'll store 100 gallons of water for you, keep it fresh, not contaminated by the, in your bathtub. So, for $20, you could do something like that. You don't necessarily have to go out and put a cistern in your backyard.
Right.
But, if you have a basement, dropping $75 to buy a water barrel to have 55 gallons on hand for an emergency. And there's other areas in your house you would have access to water. Your hot water heater is going to contain it. God forbid you'd have to, but the water in your toilet tank is usually clean enough to do some things with. I don't know if I would trust drinking that. But with the right filters, everything is, possible. So
yeah, that's so like I said, you can go into this, you can go in depth, but there's there's a difference between that stereotypical zombie movie apocalypse prepping, and then there's prepping, say, for occurrences that are almost going to happen every year. So if you're in the Northeast, there's a good chance you're probably going to get a hurricane or a nor'easter, tropical storm. Something like that is going to happen. If you live in the Midwest, there's a good chance that you might have some issues with a tornado or something like that. Wildfires, big in California right now. If you're out there,
Right.
There's a good chance that you're probably going to live through a wildfire. Texas, I don't think they thought this was going to happen. It's been over 10 years since something like this happened with the ice. But, I think the prepping side of it is going to be different than the quote unquote apocalyptic, hey, like you guys said in the scenario this week, there's an asteroid coming, or, this giant flood that's going to take us out or something like that. Can you talk a little bit, and John, please go ahead. Can you talk a little bit about those two differences, and can we prep for both of them at the same time, or should we be focused on one or the other?
I think there's a tremendous amount of overlap,
Okay.
And really there's kind of a third venue there that we should be considering too, and that's prepping for, that individual disaster, like getting sick, somebody gets cancer, they lose their job. Something terrible happens that puts you out of your element for a period of time. We can't forget about that. But prepping is prepping. If you're doing something to put yourself in a better position, whether that's putting some money into the bank so that if I do lose my job, I got 6 months worth of my salary saved up to tap into, or You know, if I live in that area where I'm prone to hurricanes, you know, I've got boards for my windows already pre-cut and ready to go. And I've got an emergency radio or a weather radio. So I pay attention to that really closely. There's, you know, those things all overlap into those three different categories. Carson, I know you have a pretty strong opinion on this.
Yeah, I do. So just like John said, there is a lot of overlap. For the most part, the keeping it simple factor, you're going to see where the main overlap is. But I think the important thing here is to define what apocalyptic scenario looks like.
Okay.
So hurricane, not so much apocalyptic scenario, but a pretty bad natural disaster. In my opinion, now, I mean, everybody's going to be different. Apocalyptic scenario to me would be an asteroid, a mega volcano, a mass famine where all the crops die, or some type of nuclear war or global war where all production stops of food and water and fresh water. That to me is apocalyptic. So the difference would be, I guess if you're prepping for an apocalyptic scenario, quote unquote, the ultimate goal would be complete self-sustainment. So can you grow your own crops? Can you produce your own water with a well? Can you go out and hunt your own food? Are you ready for the winter when it comes when there's not going to be as much hunting or crops? It's planning ahead and having being able to be completely self-sustaining, or at least making that a goal. So I know me and John talk about it's not a level we're even at yet, but it's something that everybody should strive to learn is self-sustainment in some form, because in that type of apocalyptic scenario, most likely the trucks aren't going to start rolling food in anytime soon. So you're gonna have to figure out ways to get water, to get medicines, and that's a really in-depth version of, I guess, survival, because at that point you have to start looking at different types of medicinal plants and scouting out different areas, making sure your home's defended from any invaders that might be trying to steal what you have. So that's really the main difference for apocalyptic scenario. Is the ultimate goal would be self-sustainment. You want to be able to literally take care of yourself completely without the hope that trucks are going to start rolling in with food, or they're going to start bringing water in. I mean, you have to pretty much be able to handle all of that yourself.
And if anybody out there is thinking, well, that's crazy, we don't have to get ready for that, it's not going to happen, just take this past year. How close did we get to grocery stores having no food on the shelves? You couldn't buy steak. You couldn't buy toilet paper. You said it earlier. So it's not that crazy when you think about it. And it's not that off the wall that production lines would stop. I mean, even Amazon, the great and all powerful Amazon, couldn't get stuff out on time and didn't have things in stock. If you'd have told me 5 years ago that I wouldn't have my 2-day shipping and I wouldn't have things just dropped on my doorstep when I wanted them, I would have said you were crazy, because Amazon, that's what it is. You take it for granted.
Exactly. Go ahead, John. Sorry, brother.
We're in a really delicate infrastructure that we've become accustomed to. You know, everything at the stores, it runs off a just-in-time inventory system, so they only stock enough food for 3 days.
Yes. Yep.
There's a book or a quote or something, 9 Meals from Anarchy. I'm not sure I can quote the person that said it, but there's a lot of truth behind that. 9 Meals from Anarchy just means that within 72 hours, you know, if the food trucks stop showing up, the food stores are empty. The gas trucks are not rolling out. Gas pumps aren't getting filled, you know? And that's how our entire infrastructure works. So when you have something cataclysmic that gets in the way of that, whether, you know, it be logistical challenges because of a storm in an area or a road that, you know, suffered breakage, or it's you know, more at the internal level, anything could disrupt that infrastructure and could put you in a precarious situation where you can't go to the store and get what you need. So you got to figure out how you're going to take care of yourself. Yeah.
And we see how quickly two things can happen at the same time, because again, using this past year as an example, because Carson, you were talking about security as well. At the same time as things were flying off the shelves and we couldn't get products, we were also dealing with protests across the whole country. And there was this threat, there was this kind of overwhelming idea that they were going into suburbia and it wasn't just in the cities. And it was, people were acting in hostile ways towards just the mass populace, not just against, one group of people. So
Right.
now you have two things going on that I think people hadn't really thought about that much before. And I know, listen, I think about some weird stuff. My brain's always going. So this isn't the first time that I'm like, hey, I have MREs waiting. I have MREs in my truck. I have a go bag in my truck for when I travel, stuff like that. I make sure that I have basics. I would never say that I know that much about this stuff, but I have some basics that I go with. I was even looking at this going, all right, telling my wife, listen, I heard that there's protests that are getting a little closer to the house. We might want to just beef up security around the house a little bit. I have camera systems. Hey, let's check the camera systems more often. Let's make sure that the alarm is set, make sure that anything that we need for our own personal security is taken care of and ready to go. Whereas I probably wouldn't have thought about that beforehand. And again, it compounded because I was also like, hey, if somebody wants a steak and they haven't eaten in 3 days, they're going to come get the steak out of my freezer.
Exactly. And to add to that, before we move on, a type of scenario like this has happened in the world before. It's just not something you encounter every day. A great book that everybody should read is called The Dark Secrets of SHTF Survival. And it's about a guy named Selko Begovic, and he survived. So basically it was the Balkan Wars, and his whole city was under siege, and they had no food or water for a year, nothing. So the book dives into, pretty much neighbors who knew each other for years turning on each other. And the book dives into how the country kind of manipulated the whole situation to make it happen. So it's really not that far-fetched that people could be in a scenario like that, because it has happened in the world before.
Yeah. And you see just, we like to think that, the United States, this stuff's not going to happen here. But you see the basis of the United States kind of in a constant flux nowadays. Everybody, it's so polarizing out there. This group doesn't like this group. This group's protest. If you'd have told me that you were going to have live television with people storming the Capitol and I was going to be watching it, I would have said, you're crazy. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So all these things are kind of happening that we never really thought were going to happen. So it's the people that are prepared for this stuff that aren't going to be so worried and are going to think clearly if something bad happens. Because I think that's a point that you brought up already, is being able to think clearly. And if you have a plan and you're not completely stressed out when something happens, and you have that 6 months of cash, say, in the bank, you have food, you have water, you have the basics to survive. Now you can start thinking about all the other stuff that you might need to do in that scenario, whatever the scenario may be.
Right. Yeah, and that goes back to like what you were saying, the things that we can control. What can we control in that situation? If there's riots coming to your house, like what can you control? And that's important in any of those situations. You have to be trained up and ready to react without freaking out, so to speak.
Yeah, that's being able to keep a level head when everybody else around you is going crazy is going to be a good thing for you.
That'll keep you alive. Generally.
It'll definitely keep you alive, without a doubt. So we talked about training a little bit, and we talked about always wanting to learn, all that kind of stuff. So if I'm brand new, say, to prepping, if I'm just getting started, like you said, information overload. If you just type prepping into YouTube, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of videos. You don't know if these people are reputable. You don't know which one you should start with and where you should kind of go. What are some basic skills that people that are just starting out should really focus on from the training and, the education side of the house? Either one, please. John, if you'd like.
Go ahead, John.
All right. So, I think that if you're looking to build just foundational skills, I think about first, where do you spend the most time at home? So understanding some basic maintenance about your home in case of an emergency, turning off the gas, the water, the electric, or turning those services back on. That's a pretty fundamental skill that everybody should have. In addition to that, knowing how to exit the home in the event of a fire, knowing how to address a fire in your home. Those are some of the most common incidents that people face. Beyond that, what happens if somebody gets hurt? You know, some pretty basic first aid skills are great, but I always encourage people to take it a level up. Go seek out a Red Cross course or a TECC course, which stands for Tactical Emergency Casualty Care. It teaches you how to stop a significant bleed, apply a tourniquet, those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
There's also actual the bleed courses that you could take, but these are all really fun. They're exciting. You know, to be able to walk away and say, I might be able to save somebody's life with this knowledge. Beyond that, you know, learning how to treat just some of the really disastrous things like shock or hypothermia, hyperthermia. You know, so I would definitely say first aid is another big thing. And then beyond that, I'll let Carson touch on the bushcraft stuff, because I know that that's, you know, pretty near and dear to his heart, but just building a plan. I know it's not so much a training thing, but taking the time to understand your risks that you could potentially be exposed to and building a plan for those risks. That's really the other kind of fundamental thing that I think a lot of people miss out on. Everybody goes right for the glorious bug out bag. Let me go buy a bunch of gear, throw it in a bag, and never take it out of the packaging. I mean, it drives me crazy. I get frustrated. Every time I see these videos on YouTube where somebody's demonstrating their bug out bag, everything in that bag is still in the packaging. It's like, know that thing is going to break the second time you use it. If you had used it, you would have figured that out by now. We've done that, gone through all that trial and error. And so, again, I'm coming back to those foundational principles. Don't do them, don't make the mistakes that I made over my first 5 or 6 years of doing this. Now that I understand the structure behind it, I could easily say, here's what would be prioritized early on. And building that plan, understanding risks and building a plan around those risks is really one of the key principles there. Yeah.
And definitely trying out your equipment. I can't agree more. Yes. Because listen,
absolutely.
If you bought that thing for $20 on Amazon and there was 52 tools in it, I'm going to go ahead and say 49 of them are probably going to break the first time you use them because it was $20 for 59 tools. You might get 1 or 2 things out of there that were pretty good, but there's a good chance this stuff's not going to be that great. If you're doing this stuff on a budget, you might be in that scenario. Take your stuff out, use it, train with it so you know how to use it. And it's not the first time you open up the package and you've never seen this thing before. So I want to echo that because that's very important. But to get into a little bit of the bushcraft side of the house, Carson, what are some basic skills that you think that people should learn just starting out?
Right. So yeah, I guess bushcraft would be part of it, but my basics are a little more outdoor focused, while John's are a little more around the prepping, and that's kind of what makes our group special. Is we offer something different here. So
yeah,
I'll say learning basics, how to build a fire. What if you have to take a 3-day bug out, for example? We'll use that as a scenario for this. Can you build a fire to keep yourself warm, to boil your water? How do you obtain the water? That's another skill. Obtaining and processing water, processing wood to fuel that fire. Obtaining food is another one. Even if it's simple traps or how to hunt, and whatnot. So which more will be coming on that in the future when we release our videos. Map reading is a good one. If you've been using your GPS your whole life and you have to get to your bug out location, if you don't know how to read a map, then, well, you're kind of screwed. So that's a very overlooked one too, is map reading. And that's something I've been working on personally lately too, is brushing up on map reading skills, topographical maps and whatnot, just to be efficient at it. Navigation skills, general navigation skills without a map, using the stars. First aid, like John said, you got to be able to handle cuts, bruises, bumps, sprains whenever you're outdoors, whether it's a bug out or just on a camping trip. We have barter and trading skills. You want to be able to barter and trade for different items if you need to, whether it's ammo or whatnot, if you need medicine for, say, your wife or kid. Mechanical repair skills are always going to be invaluable because if you're bugging out in your vehicle or you're able to maintain your vehicle for some type of survival situation, you want to be able to do minor repairs on it, whether it's oil or spark plugs. Basic electrical circuitry repair skills, repairing computers or circuitry on your vehicle. You don't have to be an expert at it, but just understanding the basics of electricity is a good skill to have in general. A very overlooked one is clothing repair skills. I've been out with a lot of people who've ripped their shirts wide open out in the wilderness camping, and they either don't have an extra shirt or they don't know how to repair it, whether it's just sewing it together. So that's a good skill everybody should probably throw in their bag. Know how to repair your clothes. And lastly, fitness. Another overlooked one is fitness. I've gone, again, hiking in the woods with friends or anybody, and it's amazing how quickly people get tired out. So fitness should be a pretty constant priority when it comes to prepping and survival, just so you're able to carry yourself. You don't want to have to worry about being out of breath every mile when you're bugging out or when you're tromping around in the woods camping. So just basic fitness, get out there and run a 5K, lift some weights, do some calisthenics.
Yeah, I can see how fitness would definitely be an overlooked one, especially because, like you said, if you're going to be carrying all this stuff, if you do have to bug out and you have to go any type of a longer distance, especially if you start running out of gas or anything like that, if you got a 30-pound ruck on and you're going to do 20 miles and you're not in any shape, it's not going to happen. Your body's going to break down. Yeah.
And it will. And people don't realize that. I mean, everybody's got this thing in their head where it's like, oh, I can definitely do it. Like, I can handle it, no problem. But then when they don't practice what they preach, people fall apart. And I mean, the last thing you want to worry about is having shin splints when you're trying to bug out to your location on foot. So it's important to maintain fitness, and it doesn't even have to be a lot. I think I go a little overboard with some of mine. I do a lot of running throughout the week and whatnot, but just getting out there and making sure your cardio is together, making sure your joints are healthy, carrying that ruck, not to mention the mental stress of dealing with some type of survival situation. Being in shape helps with that. Not being overweight, make sure you can handle yourself, handle ammo, handle your kids. I mean, for example, if you have to even walk 10 miles and you have a 2-year-old, you might have to carry the kid the whole time with your ruck on. So it's just being prepared in all aspects.
And for anybody out there that doesn't have a 2-year-old or a 2.5-year-old, that's 30 pounds of flopping around weight. That's not, hey, this nice even on your body with, your weighted vest, that type of thing. It's,
screaming in your face,
screaming, arching the back. We've all been there. So you better be ready for something. And again, that's just another stressor, because I guarantee you that 2.5-year-old or 2-year-old or 3-year-old is not probably going to be in the best mood if it is a disaster type scenario. This isn't your good kid watching iPad.
Right. And it goes back to making sure you, like John mentioned it earlier, one of the biggest things is having a plan. If you don't plan for that, then it's not going to go over well. Do you have diapers for the kid? It's the simple things like making sure it's planned out beforehand. So when you actually have to do it, those skills are ready to go. You're trained up on the skills, and you just react to your plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, and that plan is going to change depending on who you're taking with you. And you've both said that, exactly. Multiple times already. So keep that in mind as kind of a recurring theme through this interview is that your plan has to take into account all of these things. It can't just be, hey, I'm running out the door, grabbing my nice bug out bag that I opened all my products up and tested them out first. But I'm actually thinking of, hey, my wife has certain needs. She has medications that might be different than me.
Right.
My child might have medications, diapers. You might want something different for the child to sleep on if you did have to sleep outside. It's not going to be your sleeping bag or something like that. So all of these things go into your plan.
Exactly. And the skills, really, and like I forgot to mention earlier, one of my, I guess, personal principles as well is adaptability. You have to be able to adapt to anything. Because often your plan A fails. It happened. I mean, you're ex-military, you understand. Yep. They're plan A, B, C, D, E, and it's usually plan D that you go with. So it's the same thing. You have to be able to adapt to situations, and that's where the skills come in handy. You can have those skills to help with your adapting and make the situation work in your favor.
Yep. And do more with less. That if anybody in the military knows, you do more with less. So keep those.
Don't even get me started.
Keep those things in mind as we kind of go along. It's an interesting world out there, and you're not going to have everything that you pictured in this beautiful, video online. Things are going to break. Like John said, you're going to forget something. You're going to leave something behind. We're all human. Things are going to go wrong, especially in a stressful disaster way. So, adapting and overcoming and doing more with, what you have is going to be key to any situation. So we talked a little bit about skills. So we talked about learning, and one of the first things that we should learn, I hone in right away to first aid. That would be my big one. Just for me, because I think nothing's going to trip you up more than an injury. And being able to deal with the injury of yourself or a loved one, that is a huge skill to have in any emergency. And knowing that you have that skill in the back of your head, it's going to make you feel a little bit better if you know, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to get to a hospital. Roads are closed, blizzard, right, whatever. Knowing that I'm going to be able to take care of my family if something happens is a big stress reliever for me. What are some items, if you had to pick, say, first item that you would purchase going into the prepping world? We'll start with that. John, what would be that first item or items like in a group that you would purchase?
I mean, if you're first walking through the door of the preparedness world here, I would say start off with 2 weeks of food and water for your home.
Okay.
I mean, it's a really obtainable goal. You put off to the side. Quick definition on what 2 weeks of water looks like. There's a need of about a gallon per person per day.
Okay.
You have a family of 4, you need 4 gallons per day. Now, really, that is water for hygiene, brushing your teeth, wash your hands, cooking, and drinking. You're going to need about a gallon per person per day. There is needs beyond that. It doesn't mean you should stop there or say that I've got everything I need, because if you have to flush a toilet and you have no running water, you're in trouble. You're going to use a gallon of water just to flush a toilet. Mm-hmm. If you have to wash dishes after you cook a meal, those kind of things use up water as well. But our first and foremost priority is making sure that we can drink and cook food with the water that we have. So 2 weeks, that's the starting point.
Definitely. It's a good starting point. Now, what does that food kind of look like for you? Are you an MRE guy? Are you those buckets that you can buy at Sam's Club? What when we talk food, are we talking about stuff that we could just cook in the house, no problem, or?
Yeah, I think your first priority should be getting your pantry in line. So
okay.
I want to have at least 2 weeks of food in my pantry. And if I've got 2 weeks of food in my pantry, and that could be canned foods, mm-hmm. It could be, some prepackaged foods that you just throw some water in and you're ready to go. MREs, don't get me wrong, MREs have a purpose. But that purpose is really in the military. They're designed to provide a soldier with the nutrients that they need to maintain, a highly active lifestyle for that amount of time. And to do so and boost morale when you don't have access to, a warm meal otherwise. But is it the best meal for preparedness? Probably not. In my opinion, it's nice to have a case of them. And mm-hmm. I personally, I geek out about MREs. I love them, and I make my own. And that's a kind of an alternate way of doing it, is just making your own with the stuff you really like, because you ain't gonna have somebody there that you could trade the tortillas with for something. You know what I mean? But they're bulky. They're heavy. Most of the stuff gets field stripped. So if you're putting your money into that, chances are you're leaving some opportunity on the table. I would say after you get that pantry set up and squared away, and you have at least, and consider when I say 2 weeks of food too, I'm not talking about, 3 bags of Doritos, a can of salsa, and a bunch of Oreos. I'm talking about like actual sustainable nutrition, and does that mean maybe you have a multivitamin to go along with the fact that you don't have some great protein because your refrigerator is out, sure, add a multivitamin, but have some real food that you can cook. When you start getting into more of the long-term preparedness, that's when you start looking at things like, should I get a 50-pound bag of rice for $20? Because that's 75,000 calories right there. Should I get, beans? And these are things that certainly is not going to be the meal you want to be eating in the apocalypse, but any meal is better than nothing. And if you start getting yourself some of those freeze-dried meals like Mountain House, the stuff that hikers would take, those are, there's a huge variety of them available. You could take one of those meals and turn it into a meal for 4 with some additional beans and rice. So those help you kind of protect yourself from palate fatigue if you're going to, again, move from 2 weeks to a month, and then from a month to 3 months, 3 months to 9 months or a year. And once you get to a year, the question is, do you stop there or do you keep on going? Depends on your situation, though. Everybody's going to have a different answer to that question.
Yeah. I mean, it could be something as simple as storage might become the issue. If you live in a smaller home or apartment or something like that, you might have to stop at, say, 6 months because you might not have a good way to store the product. So,
Yeah. Well, and there's also the consideration of if in reviewing your risk analysis, what are the things I'm worried about? What are the things I'm preparing for? If you know that there's a 99% chance that the things you're preparing for are going to lead you to have to bug out, well, maybe I'm not looking to get, a 55-gallon drum of water and 200 pounds of rice. I might be looking for stuff that's easily transportable. And maybe my food storage is not so much focused on stocking my basement. It's stocking a cache location that's on the way to my bug out, so I don't have to carry everything. There's different ways you can approach that.
Definitely. Carson, if you had to buy, what's your first go-to? I know you come from a little bit of a different background than John with more of this survival bushcraft, that type of stuff. I mean, I'm assuming you're not going to carry 2 weeks of food like he was just saying. You might have to do it in a different way where you have it out in the field somewhere for you. So is your item a little different?
Actually, I'm on the same page with John on this one. I think about really 2 weeks of food and water is a great, if I had to pick, because generally that's what you're going to need right away. Like John said, I mean, people don't realize how much water they use until you actually add it up. So having that food and water ready is good. Like, it's good for morale. But also, making sure you have a way to cook that food. So I would at least add maybe some propane to that. So if you have a grill, you can at least run that grill daily for those 2 weeks. If it's a 2 week scenario, roughly, or even if it's a week scenario, have a way to cook that food that's stress free. So you're not, trying to scrounge together a way and I would make sure that used to eating. And then obviously down the road, you'll get more into the buckets and whatnot. But I'm on the same page. 2 weeks of water and food, enough for everybody to live comfortably for those 2 weeks.
Excellent. It's good to see you guys agree.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed that neither one of you said a shiny custom AR-15. I applaud you for that, simply for the fact of the shiny items are usually not the items that are the first things that you need. Not to say that having a weapon is not something that you should have, but if you're not eating, maybe that isn't the most important thing. If you don't have enough water,
right,
the AR ain't going to help you that much. And maybe it's not the best weapon if you're going to be using it for hunting. You might want something that's more of a hunting type weapon. Great for, going for wild boar or something like that, but not so great for deer and things in this area. I mean, I know a lot of guys would rather just have their bow out deer hunting. So, okay, perfect. Yeah. I'm new to bow hunting myself, so I've been learning.
So am I, yeah.
I'm trying to come up with it. But again, the shiny objects are not always the objects that you really need the first of.
And then the aspect that everybody wants.
Yeah, of course.
Right, and then the aspect of guns, the object is to avoid combat at all cost. I mean, Even the military teaches you that to an extent. I'm not trying to get in gunfights when I have kids in the house. If I have to, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Yeah, it's pretty low on my list, surprisingly. The whole AR thing. I have guns and I'll use them. I know how to use them, but my goal is to avoid conflict at all costs. I would rather give some crazy person a couple cans of food and send them on their way, and then just keep my eyes open, than just whip a gun out in their face as in being hostile. And not everybody will agree with that. People will say, oh, well, they're going to know you have food, right? But I'm not trying to come off as a hostile person, and I don't want somebody else to come off hostile to me. And if I can de-escalate the situation, then that's what I'm going to do.
And that goes back to one of the skills that you talked about: charisma, a little bit of ability to barter, and a little bit of de-escalation training probably wouldn't hurt either, because like you said, if you got kids around, getting in a gunfight, probably not the best idea. There's probably a better way to get out of that scenario. And
if they come back later heckling me for more food, then maybe I'll have to get more violent then. I don't want to, but I'm that's never going to be my first option.
Right.
Unless somebody's trying to harm my family directly.
Yeah. I agree.
You always got to remember the legal aspect. It may be temporarily displaced, but it eventually is going to come back and haunt you. So just because you're in a crisis doesn't mean you go around and start shooting people because they're walking down your block and look suspicious.
I think people forget the legal side of things a lot. I think a prime example is what just happened down in the Capitol. You had all these people doing what they thought what they wanted to do. Again, I don't try not to talk political too much on the show because this is more of getting information out for people. But you had people do something they thought was right, but how many of them thought about the ramifications legally after the fact? I think they all time were just going to walk back out.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all about consider that when mob mentality is taken over, it's just follow the crowd and not take a moment to realize, am I getting myself in a whole hell of a lot of trouble here, or is this the right move I should be making right now? Yeah, for sure. Funny how the movement of a group goes.
It really is. And when you talk survival and kind of prepping, that mob mentality is something that you're going to have to kind of deal with, especially if it's an extended crisis, because all it takes is for one group of people to say, hey, we're going to start bum rushing houses to take food. That group's going to grow because people are going to attach to that because they see it as strength, or they just, like you said, mob mentality, you see a bunch of people running in one direction, I'm going to run with them.
Yep. So, well, and not only that, but don't forget, when we talked about kind of the 3-day supply chain, how fragile that is and how easily it could get broken. So if we start running out of food and you don't have people out there with a 2-week pantry, then what? Quickly would you turn around and do something that's maybe a little bit morally questionable because you know that you're looking at a hungry set of eyes in your 2-year-old? You know what I mean? That's the thing, is like, there's great people out there. There's a lot of great people. The great people will do some ugly things if it means I'm going to keep feeding my child.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where the violence is going to come in. And, once people realize that the trucks aren't coming anymore, things will get bad. And people have to be ready to avoid that at all costs if they want to survive, because it'll just be some mass murder going on. And you don't want to be anywhere around that. That's going to be the worst part of any apocalyptic scenario, is the beginning, what the people are going to do.
Yeah, I'm more worried about people than I am nature. I can deal with nature for the most part. You can figure it out, especially once you get past the initial shock of whatever the disaster is. If it is a natural disaster, people are unpredictable, and it's only going to cascade and get worse as things go longer and longer.
I'm pretty sure they and it's funny, John was talking about Walking Dead earlier. I want to say on that show, it might be that zombie show, that they bring up that the zombies on the show aren't the problem because they're predictable. They're easy to predict, but it's the people that on the show that always cause the problems. It's the cannibals and the crazy like tyrants and whatnot that arise. It's never the zombies that are the problem. They're always just kind of there. You know, it's the people. That's what it's about. It's about how do they rebuild civilization and whatnot. And you see the good in people in the show, and then you see the very, very evil. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, by season 3, the zombies are just like a nuisance at that point. They're not even really
Right.
there. It's all the other infighting and the this governor or this guy with you got a guy with a tiger. I mean, it's you never know what you're going to do.
Right. Or what am I going to do tomorrow?
What am I doing with the guy with the tiger? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about and we've talked about this a little bit already. There's a big difference between prepping for yourself or prepping for your family. And again, talking about if you have buy-in from the family, which you may or may not, that might affect how you prepare, because you kind of have to take it upon yourself to prepare for them if that's the scenario. But what are some things that you can kind of cue in? The difference between prepping for an individual, what are some things that we kind of need to do different when we really start focusing on, say, the family and making sure that the family is going to be taken care of? John, please.
Yeah. So, with the family, the first consideration is, what am I changing with my gear? I know that if I was planning my loadout to get out of Dodge for myself, I probably wouldn't have much more than my bug out bag. I have everything I need in there and I'm ready to go. Even some stuff for potentially a second person I might encounter. But when I start thinking about, I got to bring the wife, I got to bring 2 kids, and of course there's 2 dogs that come with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have to account for all the gear needs that come with 2 kids. I have to account for the timing that it takes to get 2 kids ready. So if I was in a crisis, reaction time, I mean, I challenge anybody with 1 child, 2 children, 3 children, just see how quickly you can bug out without having to pack any gear. Just say, hey, we got to go, and see how long it takes you to get in the car and actually be buckled up and ready to leave. Add crisis to that. People are stressed out. You're forgetting things. You're jogging checklists in your head of what do I got to grab before I leave my house for potentially the last time. So making lists of things that you're going to need for grandma who has special health needs, or for Susie who might be autistic, and we have special considerations for her as well. The supplies vary drastically. If I'm bringing small children, I'm going to be bringing some comfort items for them. They might not be a vital survival tool, but for my child, they will be, and in the long run, they're going to pay dividends. You also have to account for things like, if I'm traveling with this many people, does that affect the routes that I might be going to get to my destination if I'm bugging out? Can I really travel that way, or is it too unsafe because I have small children in the car? Whereas if I encountered a situation, I could get out and run. Or, you kind of get the point there that there's these variables that come in when you have somebody that might be slow moving, or require some additional equipment, or somebody that's on oxygen, somebody that's taking insulin. Having extra supply of all of that stuff is super critical. And again, if it was just me, I wouldn't be thinking about that stuff. The pets, certainly anything you would need to pack for your pets if you were taking them on vacation, you need to have ready in a bug out. So food, water, something to quiet them, perhaps, if they're going to come with you, or you're going to make the ultimate hard decision to leave man's best friend behind.
Yeah, no. Dogs are coming with. Dogs are definitely coming with.
Of course.
I don't know, Carson. I mean, did I miss some stuff there? What would you add?
I mean, yeah, you pretty much covered all of it. I mean, the only thing I'd really add is, but I'm pretty sure you covered it, is it's just prepping for a family. You got to remember there's more mouths to feed. So it's going to take longer to build up that stock. So you just have to plan for that. I mean, it's not just you're feeding. I mean, you could realistically live off of a 2-week prep as a single person for months if you had to, but it's a little different with family. You have to more mouths to feed, more people to take care of. So all that has to be taken into consideration, whether it's diapers for the kids or, like John said, medicine for a family member. So it definitely makes it more complicated, but at the same time, it's good to have that family dynamic and having other people to watch your back. So I know if I have to bug out with my family, I'll have my mom and dad, my wife and kids. And I know I can count on my dad to watch my back when I'm sleeping, which is, and vice versa. So it's good to have that kind of community dynamic with the family.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm very close with my parents. I know my dad, me and him would work in tandem to do things. So
Right, same here.
yeah, even though I know that like in a disaster, I would have to plan for them coming with me, it would be a tool. It would definitely be a bonus to have.
Right.
him.
And my dad's been doing this for years. So, he just has to point and tell me what to do, and I can do all the heavy lifting in the beginning.
Exactly.
It makes a good team dynamic. I'm still young. I got a lot of energy, and he's older, and he's got a lot of knowledge. So I know we'd make a good team, and that's kind of one of the positives of having the family involved.
One of the things actually, John, that you said is that difference in time to get out, say. And when you were saying that, in my head, I'm thinking of the difference between, say, my daughter at 2.5 or a guy that maybe has a 14-year-old daughter or a 15-year-old son or whatever, who now has like an opinion. Okay. If I tell my daughter, get in a truck, she might not want to. She might throw a little bit of a fit, but we're getting in the truck. A 14-year-old daughter or son who has an opinion, who might say, no, I don't want to go. Dad, you're being crazy. We shouldn't leave. Mm-hmm. I have a different idea than you. I think that kind of goes back to that kind of buy-in. Even if you don't have buy-in for purchasing large quantities of items and things like that, but if you have a buy-in for the actual plan, this is what we are going to do. This is how we're going to attack a situation if something happens. If you have children of that age, that could probably be invaluable at that point.
Right. You really have to think about whether or not you're going to have inclusion of the rest of the party, right? So are they going to play this game with me and practice this stuff, or am I going to have to design this plan in a manner that I can just hand it to you and you'll react to the disaster? And that's kind of how I've done it with my family. Like I said, my wife's on board. She supports what I'm doing. She takes interest to a certain degree, but she's not, gung-ho about it. And so I know that I can only go so far. She'll do drills with me if I ask her to and things like that. We practice this kind of stuff to make sure that we can execute on our plan. But if I wasn't home and the crisis happened and she's there with the kids, I have put together a small booklet, it's like 5x7 in a little spiral bound notebook that as long as I can reach her, I could say, turn to page 7, it'll tell you everything you need to know. And it'll tell her how to link up with me, where we're going next, what to do, what to bring. There's all sorts of pre-calculated details so that when we're in the situation, we don't have to think about it. It's ready to go. I've got one in each car, contains maps to our locations. There's a variety, there's a wealth of information in this little tiny booklet, but the point of it was so that I could give it to anybody. I could give it to my sister, to my brother, to my aunt and uncle, and everybody would be able to look at it and know exactly what we're doing and end up at the same destination, safely. So there's always ways around the family that doesn't support your motive here.
Yeah. No, and it's good, but it's good that you can recognize. I think that's the key: is recognize your audience. So recognize the difference between a family who's just saying, "Yeah, Dad, go have fun," or do your thing, and a family that's really buying in and saying, "I want to practice with you. I want to," because now your two plans are going to be very different. Mm-hmm. So I like that you kind of hit on that, because I don't know that my wife would want to drill with me to do these things. But I do know if I did what you did and I wrote out a plan, I know she would execute that plan. So I think there's a good thing to plan for that. Right. So listen, we've talked about a lot of stuff here. We've talked about, how to start in this whole process of prepping, how to deal with a couple different types of scenarios, whether it's that kind of apocalyptic, whether it's a natural disaster, whatever the case may be, the difference between family and individual. What are the items we need on hand? What are some of the skills that we need to focus on? that kind of all feeds back into your guys' organization. And what you're doing is you're trying to set up this educational portal, basically, where we could go, and now I don't have to sift through 10,000 YouTube videos, because I'm just going to come to you guys and I'll have information. You have 60 gigs of info on a hard drive that you've already watched, you've already gone through, and you've kind of vetted. So can you talk to me a little bit about what you guys have been doing, the website, the videos, other services that you're kind of looking at? Either one of you can start. I don't
Carson,
know.
kick it off, man.
Yeah, I'll start with the because I as of right now, I'm going to be doing a majority of the videoing temporarily. Okay. We'll branch into me and John both doing them eventually, but what we're looking at right now is some honest gear review for one thing. We want unbiased opinion because we want people, the stuff that we recommend, we want it could potentially save or kill someone. So we want to make sure that our reviews are with tested gear and they're honest. So you'll see that coming soon. It'll be me testing different types of things, whether it's knives, fire starters, different methods. And then we're going to be doing some videos on like setting up shelters and camps outdoors, maybe doing like a little scenario if I had to bug out and do like a 3-day through the woods or whatnot. So it's going to be a multitude of different things, but we're going to be starting within the gear review section. Where me and John are both new to the video, making videos. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a learning process for us too. So, we're by no means experts at that, but we're here to learn. And so we'll be starting off honest gear reviews. You'll see some bushcraft stuff coming from me and my dad later down the road, probably in a couple months. And just some basic camp videos, how to set up camps and whatnot in the woods, and then it'll end up branching into the prepping world too. Me and John on camera together, just talking about prepping 101 or whatnot, just so people can kind of have a visual of us talking about it. So that's kind of where we're at now. Just like I said, we're going to keep it simple at first. Mm-hmm. Learn how to do the video thing, but we're hoping to really grow that section of it in the next year. Really learn and blow up the videos so we can kind of get our name out there a little bit more as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what I think that's what people really need, is a place where they could go and kind of just get some basic information without getting so overloaded that you're like, you know what, I'm not going to do any of it.
Right.
Because that's the other option.
Yeah, and the thing for the videos too is that I want people to realize is I'm just a regular guy. I'm not an expert at bushcraft. I'm not an expert at prepping, but the point is you can get to the point where you're a regular person and still learn these skills that can potentially save your life. Like I said, I'm not a bushcrafter. I'm not Les Stroud or Dave Canterbury. I can't do all that crazy stuff, but I know some things for the average person, how to keep yourself alive in those situations. That's kind of what I want to do is show that you can be a regular person. You don't have to go overboard and still learn these skills. Yeah. Yeah. And that regular person. That regular person thing is important, because most of us are not that bushcraft guy. Most of us are not special ops from the military with millions of dollars of training in the Air Force. So
exactly. Yeah. Like I said, people know I was a mechanic,
right. Same here.
Yeah. That's what I did. So, they trained me to chuck a wrench at your head. That's about all I would have done. I mean, I used my M16 5 times when I was in the military.
Yeah, right. And the point is too, like people like us have other hobbies. Like I have other hobbies. It's not just prepping and outdoor survival. There's other things I like. I'm big into fitness. I like to go off road in my Jeep. So it's manageable. That's the whole point. We want people to know it's manageable. It's doable to be to live this lifestyle, but still also live a regular lifestyle as well. Right. Your average, I guess, quote unquote American dream. So
right.
Exactly. We are not those guys you see on the show from Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate to.
I don't even think those guys are the guys from the Discovery Channel.
It's there's an extreme picture that's painted, and there's kind of the alienation of this group from the general public, because that show has made people think that we're all crazy. But we care about
right.
To do a little bit of
regular people,
better position.
Yeah,
and we want to share that. We want to share that with the rest of the world too.
And I
Yeah,
think
that
what you
you
guys are
normal.
doing is going to help with kind of killing a little bit of that stereotype, because there really is a stereotype to kind of when you hear a prepper, even that term, you're a prepper, you're
Well, you
crazy,
have
you're
doomsday
getting,
preppers to thank
yeah,
for
you're
that. So
doomsday, right? Yeah. You
Yeah.
think that
Well,
everything's
I
going
didn't
to,
want to say the name, but yeah,
yeah,
talking
no,
about
but
it, Doomsday Preppers really gave it a bad taste.
yeah, but I think what you guys
yeah,
are doing is going to help.
We're gonna bring a program to the website, and the goal, I mean, we're gonna continue to push out normal content like we would, but we're also going to scale back and start from ground zero. What is your very first step if you're getting into prepping, and continue a series throughout the entire year, kind of outlining a guide, a how-to guide of what to do. And we'll have those numbered sequentially so that if you join in 6 months into the process, you could go back to number one and start, follow it in the proper order.
I got you. Yeah.
May include some videos, that may include some documents that you could print out or study or read or learn or whatever. But we're going to kind of put a plan together that includes action items, purchasing some things, to build and enhance your
skills.
skills. It's going to be our way to help people that are afraid to get in find the door. That door is there. You just got to open and walk through.
That's great.
Yep, and just like John said, like we'll have we're gonna have both aspects. Like I mean, he'll be focusing on the more prepping aspect, and then I'll have the beginner stuff going for what do you do in the woods by yourself out there. And like I said, I'm not an expert, and I don't want anybody to think I am, but it's like we said, it's okay to be a regular person and still know some of this stuff. But even though you're not a spec ops guy or I don't know, some type of cool job that you would expect. I mean, it's possible to learn these things and still be a regular person every day, and learn it in a manner that's not going to overwhelm you.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked a little bit about your kind of where you're going with the videos and stuff like that. Are there any other future plans that you guys are looking into doing? Because right now everything is free. You can go to the website. These videos are going to be out there. You're not going to have to pay for anything. Just so anybody out there listening, don't think that you got to all of a sudden do a monthly subscription to get this information. These guys are just putting this stuff out for everybody to have. I want to say that. But are you looking at anything down the road? Any future plans?
Yeah, so probably the next closest thing that we're going to be introducing, and it's very early on in the formulation stages, so I don't want to share too much information, but it's Project Safe Home. And essentially the premise that I had when I had founded Zero Disaster into a group instead of just being me, was I was looking for those people that I could trust, building those connections out there throughout the country, and our group has grown. There's 6 or 7 of us now, and we're scattered all over the country. And I know that if I was ever in a crisis somewhere away from home, I could go to any one of those guys and they would take care of me. And
right.
They would help me out in getting back home, or posting me up for a short term or whatever it may be. And I would do the same for any of them. And so we want to kind of open that network up to others. And we're looking at building this map and a login, and I have to still work, we're working on the legalities around this and the liabilities, but we would like to be able to create a network where people could sign up and say, look, as part of this network, I open, myself up to being helpful potentially. Mm-hmm. And it could be something as simple as, hey, I'm 20 miles from your location, but I got a flat tire. Could you come out and help me? To something a little bit more advanced. And it could even be, hey, this person is in need right now. They had a home fire. They lost everything. So we might run volunteer programs or, I don't know where it's going to go yet. This is early stages, but it's something that we're going to be publicizing a little bit more in the near future as we get the legalities figured out. And then long-term goals for us is, of course, to go into and offer consulting training services.
Okay.
So
yeah.
That's really the kind of the pipe dream for us here, probably within the next 2 years. For now, you got questions, you can reach out to us through the website, through our social media platforms, and we're happy to give you that information for free. At the point, that's our goal, is this will be a consulting business. So
very cool. Very cool. And there's a need for it. I had somebody on from an organization called Decisive Aim, and one of the things that he started doing was in-home security consulting. So he expanded from just his firearms training and stuff like that into consulting, because he really saw the need there where, listen, you can go to a range and shoot, but if I come to your home and say exactly how I would attack this home if I was the one that was going to attack it, and now set up a security plan for you, that's a much better way to spend, say, $800.
Yeah, absolutely.
That now you have something right in front of you. So for you guys, The same kind of thing. If I'm going to spend $800 on something, say, I would love to walk out with a whole plan. This is what I need to do. Yeah. This is my prep plan.
The idea behind that is to, take the need to learn everything off of the end user, essentially. You call us, we're going to come out, we're going to understand your situation, and we're going to build a plan for you based on your needs and what your goals are.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I like it. I think you guys are doing great. I'm into it, and I'm looking forward to the videos and that, because I'm somebody that gets down I'll go down the darkest holes of YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy it, but it's not always best for good information. And honest reviews, we need more of that, because there's too many reviews out there that you can tell that they're just happy because they want to do a video and this product's great, so please, watch my video.
Right.
Not taking away from anything that anybody's doing out there, but an honest review of a product and somebody that's willing to stand up and say, no, this is actually a piece of junk. Don't buy this thing. Yeah. You need that.
Exactly.
Especially when you spend $100.
We want people, when we make a recommendation on a piece of gear, we want to know that comes from, experience with using the product. And I'll tell you right now, every product I've purchased a variety of different ones, all the way from the cheapest until I got to the point where I said, I need this expensive version of it that's going to actually last. And, that's why my philosophy now, buy once, cry once, is, there's certain things if you're going to trust your life to it, make the investment up front, and you don't have to go through the hundreds of dollars spent on all the prior versions.
Exactly.
But that's where we're going.
Excellent. Well, I've kept you guys for over an hour. So, and you've given us a lot of information. It's a lot to digest for people. They know that they can go to the website and the social media and all of that. But quick closing comments. Please let us know where the website is, what the social media handles are, all that kind of stuff. John, I'll give it to you first.
Yeah, it's ZeroDisasterSurvival.com. We're also on Instagram at Zero Disaster Survival. We're on Facebook. We're on Pinterest. You just search Zero Disaster Survival on Google and all our social media.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Carson, do you have anything? Last comments?
Yeah, if anybody has questions, we're available on social media. Me and John both monitor the Facebook and the Instagram daily. We're communicating with people daily, so don't hesitate to reach out. Well, you'll get a response within a day for sure. So if you have any questions about prepping, survival, or just anything in general from this podcast, reach out. We're here.
Awesome. Again, guys, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This is a topic that I wanted to dive into. And when I started following you, I knew, I was like, all right, I'm good with these guys. Let's get them on the show. Let's talk about this stuff. And I appreciate the kind of honest approach that you have for this entire craft. And that's what it is. It's a craft. There's going to be good and bad in everything. So I do appreciate all the information that you've given everybody tonight, and also the ability to ask questions in the future, because there's going to be plenty. But again, thank you guys so much. And I hope you have a great evening.
Jason, thanks so much.
Jason.
Appreciate you having us.
Thank you.